Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back, you crazy degenerates. If you are joining us, I'm Brendan Lidke, and I'm joined by the Borg, Zach Borg himself from Dakota News Now. We're going to be going over all the stuff from the Oklahoma State game today, plus whatever pops into our little minds about what's going on today in FCS. Got an interesting one going on right now between Missouri State and Montana. Montana just went up, making it a little less interesting, 26-17, but that has been a game the whole time, and Missouri State was supposed to get blown out. So, that's what we got going on. Obviously, the first time we are doing this after a loss, which is a bummer. I would be remiss if I don't quick point out and say thank you to Jackrabbit Illustrated's title sponsor of Kubota Dealers South Dakota, with 10 locations across the state of South Dakota. There's always somewhere near you to get into some orange equipment. They've got the best equipment around. So thank you so much to Kubota Dealers South Dakota for being our title sponsor. And I'm just looking here I've gotten so many text messages all day. I got to look one more thing up. And of course, our show sponsor is Jackrabbit Central. So thank you to Jackrabbit Central for covering us. They're the best place to get all your South Dakota State gear and swag that you may want throughout the season. They are the place to go. Location downtown Brookings and on campus as always. Plus on game day, they are open in the stadium. But anyways, Borg, you're kind of the guy I think most people are here to listen to anyways. What are your thoughts? I know you watched the game from afar like all of us did, but sometimes you get a better angle. What are your first thoughts about the game tonight here?
Well, at least it wasn't 52-0. As you can see by the title, I think that's the first time I've ever. First of all, good job plugging the sponsors. I don't think we didn't really have a sponsor last year, did we?
No, we didn't. We just kind of
winged it.
We kind of just threw the show together, and there wasn't really much to go on with that. So that was, and we had so many people asked to sponsor JI this year that we got sponsors for the show.
Well, that's good. You got that. That's the number one thing right away. When you get sponsors, you got to plug them early, and depending on where you're at, you got to plug them often. So that's and then the number. I said this backstage when we were getting ready to start. I've been running around today because obviously it's been a busy night. We had a lot of high school football here too. I just finished our shows and working posting. I didn't really look at the title, but I didn't recognize you without the beard. I think I missed you at the softball game. Like you said, I think I missed you at one of the Summit softball games. And it's just like, I was coming in here, I was like looking, I've got my people can't see it because I've got a laptop here that I broadcast this on, but I've got two more computer screens when I'm on my Dakota News Now setup. So I usually keep scoreboards on one, and I got the stats of whatever game we're talking about. Right now it's the SDSU, but when we talk about NDSU or USD, I'll move on to them. And so I'm just kind of going between those, and I'm posting my videos for the show. And I'm like, oh, we got a moderator in here. And then I look down, I'm like, no beard.
Yeah, it's a big change.
It's like, what was the Samson and Delilah story? But it looks good on you there. So, but no, yeah, the 52-0 I referenced was my unfortunate alma mater. Although to be fair, number 4 Texas will probably do that to just about anybody at this point. The one thing I envy about SDSU and some of these FCS schools, a friend of mine who I've known in the CSU community said that it's not that any of us expected to go and win that game, but, it'd be nice if every time they play, it didn't look like the first time they'd ever played college football. And South Dakota State, when they go into games, at least even when they do have guys who are legitimately playing their first game, they seem, even though there were some uncharacteristic mistakes today, they seem much better coached. And so, yeah, I mean, I think the first blush thoughts were that's probably, seriously, as we start to break down this game, I have to think that's the best FBS opponent they played in the Division I era. I don't want to say it's the best team they've ever played, because if you go way, way far back, they did play back when college football was a little more pure. I think they did play some really great Division I teams, however they did the association. I'm not going to say this is the best team the program has ever played, but since they moved to Division I in, 2003, 2004, this has to be. I mean, I guess before we thought it would have been TCU when they were ranked, but that team, and we'll see what Oklahoma State does. But I don't see this team doing what TCU did that year, which was just implode after, I mean, I don't know that Bowman was that impressive of a quarterback to me. He was all right. He had some nice throws. I mean, Ollie Gordon probably had, he's probably going to say that was not his best game.
Yeah.
I mean, 104 yards on 27 carries. That's working for your yards. Also had, notably also had 4 catches for 42 yards. Still ends up in the game with 3 total touchdowns. I mean, the guy that for a Heisman Trophy guy who Mike Gundy was jokingly saying, I'm going to give this guy 50 carries as a punishment for that DUI. I mean, if he'd have gotten 50 carries, he would have felt pretty bad. He would have felt pretty beat up and bruised. I thought that's probably the biggest positive takeaway. And even though this is a game where you're going to look at it and say, man, SDSU didn't do anything defensively, I'm like, they did as well as you could do against that caliber of player. The touchdowns he made plays. He broke tackles.
Right. But, and they just, it's not that the defense was awful. They just couldn't get off the field. They would, and even if they did get the stop, I mean, OSU was taking the Jacks very seriously. I mean, when you're going for it on 4th down like they did, you're not screwing around. They'd get them stopped, but it'd be 3rd and short, or when they stop them, and then they'd get it on 4th down. And yeah, Ollie Gordon really had to work for his yards. I think that's a positive for the Jacks. That run defense is still there. If you hold a running back at his caliber to 4 yards a carry, roughly, I mean, that's a quick tabulation in my head, but just over 4 yards a carry, that's pretty good.
I think it was Kyle maybe who had the comment during the game. He thought it was the best offensive line SDSU would face that he'd seen in an FBS game. And even still, like, they tried to do stuff up the middle and it just got clogged up. So I think SDSU's defensive line, and this is the benefit of the way they've, and again, I've said where they really bridged the gap and started to become a national championship team, where they bridged that gap with NDSU was when their lines started to just get deeper and more physical. But when they really went to that philosophy of almost like the hockey line changes on their defensive line, because you lose guys, but now everybody gets experienced on that line, that you don't really have too many guys who are really playing their first key minutes in that thing. And they held up well against the run. The problem was they just couldn't get any pressure. And I don't know. And this to me, we'll touch on, I mean, obviously SDSU is going to play Augustana in a couple weeks. We'll probably hit very briefly on the Northern State USD game, but there's a bit of a duality here between playing a Division II and a FBS team if you're an FCS team, because I don't think you can take the results of it and I don't know that you can fully make a judgment on how the rest of the season is going to go based on either game. Division II, I think you can really throw out the window if you kill a team, because the USD Northern State game, USD Northern has almost an entirely new roster and is playing its first D1 game. I think Augustana will be a little better, but they've lost a lot of people. That's where it really is. That's where I'm more interested to see kind of how backups do, or how some newcomers do when they're in maybe one of their first couple games. Yeah, sometimes certainly with an FBS game, you can certainly say there's a little more, but it's still one of those things where FBS, it shifts to the point where, okay, you're not, if it's a good FBS team like this was, or like Colorado was the other night for NDSU, you're not going to see that kind of talent, anything close to that again.
Right.
The Jackrabbits aren't going to see those. They're not going to probably see another back like Gordon. I'm spitballing here, but I don't think anybody else in the Valley is going to look like that.
No, nobody in FCS looks like him.
And I was also equally impressed, and I said this online too. They don't have their receivers don't have the speed of Dion's guys like a Travis Hunter or the Horn kid. They were just huge. I mean, my God, every one of those guys is. Griffin Wilde is a big dude, and they had like 5 Griffin Wildes, it felt like. So they weren't, I mean, and that's always kind of been an Oklahoma State trademark. You can go back to, some of their guys haven't necessarily panned out in the NFL, but there's the guy when Brandon Whedon was the quarterback, and they got upset by Iowa State when they were maybe going to go to the national title game. I can't remember his name, Bateman or last name either way. They've always had like the really big wide receivers. That's been kind of the trend. So, I mean, that's why I say you kind of you have to take some of the non-conference stuff with a grain of salt. I think there are concerns for SDSU. That there are some concerns, but there's also a number of guys who were playing in their first game. You got a new offensive coordinator calling plays for the first time. 2 years ago, it was the same thing when they lost their last game. You had Zach Lujan in his first game as the offensive coordinator, succeeding Jason Eck. I mean, those are tough situations when you're thrown into Iowa and Oklahoma State right away. I think the big thing is one thing I haven't seen anything to indicate otherwise. It seems like they came out of this game healthy. So to me, that's a big win. We got a touchdown.
Missouri State's going to be within 2 if they make the extra point.
I should pull this up on my
26 with 4:43 left in the fourth.
I'm gonna have to eat some words on this. I'm gonna pull this up on my computer now too.
Yeah, they're
I gotta eat some words because I talk my share of stuff about the Bears and we'll see. I mean, it's one game. Yeah. You never know, and we don't know what Montana is, but.
Right, in week 1, well, it's like you said, even the Jacks game, your first game, new old coordinator. I think you could really tell the first half that it was a new old coordinator. I think you could just really tell that the play calling seemed a little disjointed. Some of the things you're watching, like, well, and obviously, Coach Olson has a reason for whatever he's calling. And then the second half felt like they really opened up and started just running the offense and things started to happen. I think Tanner Castora described the loss perfectly. It was humbling. And I think that's good for the team and for the fan base, to be quite honest, to get a little bit of humble pie. That was a really good team. Like you said, Ollie Gordon, we're not going to face another back like that again. And I think in an FBS game, when you're facing a team the caliber of Oklahoma State, your deficiencies are going to be highlighted to the extreme. And when that O-line was phenomenal. So the pass rush wasn't great last year either. So what do you take from that? Well, it needs to get better. I think that's for sure. But is it as bad as it looked? I don't know. We won't know until we get into FCS games. Frederick Nelson's asking, what are your thoughts on Mark's performance today? It wasn't his best game at all. I don't think so. I don't think Mark would say that. I think we all have really high expectations for Mark this year, especially, and I'm sure Mark included on that. I'm sure that's not what he wanted to go out there and necessarily put on tape, but it wasn't awful either or anything like that. I mean, he made some big throws, made some big plays, just missed on a couple of them. I think that first drive really took the wind out of their sails for some reason. I can't quite put my finger on why. It felt like I felt good after watching that drive, but it felt like the tone of the team changed just watching from afar. Obviously, I'm watching on TV. It was just really odd that, just some missed throws that Mark usually doesn't miss. And I think going forward, we won't see that again. I don't know what it was about that game. Maybe they're too amped up, whatever. And too focused maybe on being too perfect. I don't know. Just didn't seem to be his best performance in that game. Missed a couple throws. And you can't afford to do that against a team like Oklahoma State.
I kind of need to look at. I gotta mute this because now I've got that game on from. Now I've got Missouri State and Montana on. I need to look at this again because we've got. I got several different highlight feeds, and one of the reasons it's kind of interesting for me. Obviously, I like being on the sidelines a lot at games, but it's interesting to kind of have the eye in the sky. And this is one of the rare weeks where I'll be able to actually just sit down and watch and kind of critically watch a game because I'm usually running between 3 games. Obviously, we don't. We have so many colleges around here. We've got high schools, and there was a window today where just everything opened up, and I was able to sit down and just watch this game and kind of see, kind of have a critical eye on it. I thought about even kind of hanging out with you a little bit, but I'm like, well, I probably need to keep a critical eye and do a little work here to get my shows ready. Almost. But No, I think I'm looking. I need to look at some video here again because there was we got a couple of different feeds from our affiliates. We got one from SDSU. Chris McDaniel just does unbelievable work, and he sent the video. I was not expecting any video from him until like 9 o'clock when he got back. Whenever they roll back into SDSU, and he sent it like within an hour. And of course, we didn't even have a 10 o'clock, or we didn't even have a 6. We had college football on, the big networks. But I did just get, before the 10 o'clock show, one of our affiliates, they had video of the interception. And I almost think that ball was tipped. I'm trying to watch that, because that was kind of a backbreaker. Not a backbreaker, I don't want to say that, but they're down 3-0. They are on their second drive. And it was just a really uncharacteristic mistake. You don't see him I don't know, he kind of led the guy or what happened. I'm watching it, and I'm going to have the highlights posted to our website too, just in a minute here. He kind of led the guy. I mean, I don't know if the linebacker jumped the route. I'm slowing it on my computer now. No. For a minute, I thought it was tipped. He very much did have an uncharacteristic game. I don't know. He had some new targets. That opening drive, I think, the freshman tight end that we've heard a lot about, Stoffel, I think, dropped that pass or whatever it was. I can't remember exactly.
He tripped over a linebacker's foot, and it looked like a play. It was one of those. It was kind of similar to. They've run it before, where Mark kind of hunches over and acts like he's running, and then he pops up and throws the ball. And I'm 99% sure you're just popping and throwing that to a spot that your big man can catch it. And when he tripped, it took him way offline because his momentum just kind of kept going that way. So the ball just went to nowhere. It was a touchdown if that doesn't happen. Mm-hmm. Football's a funny game. Who knows which way it goes after that? But
that's a big dude. I mean, maybe just a kind of placement mistake. I mean, I say this to some of those bigger guys who have bigger frames and skill players. Sometimes you just kind of get in your own way a little bit, and might have happened there. And it's his first game. I mean, the tight ends, we've heard a lot about them in this training camp. I've been impressed by Jimmy. Jimmy's been raving about him. It's going to be a very good group, but this is a very difficult place to play your first college games if you're Ganning and Stoffel. So I'm not really worried about that. I think it was just a rough game, and like I said, a little bad luck. Maybe he just kind of didn't get a good break. It did take the wind out. Yeah, I mean, I thought the second intercept. I mean, I thought for them to hold to a field goal on the opening drive, you're okay, because I think a lot of it was, and like we said, I think the offensive game planning was very tentative. Maybe they're trying to see, okay, how are we going to hold up against this team? I don't know, but is Dan Wilde Griffin's dad? There's Dan Wilde in the chat.
One of his relatives. Dad or uncle, I think.
Well, congrats. Your boy had a hell of a. Well, either way, however you're related to him, Griffin had a hell of a day, which we'll touch on. But I think, I think you knew coming into this game with the way Oklahoma State's offense has always been. Oh no, okay, well either way. Just a coincidence then. It's been a good day to be a Wildy, apparently. But the way Oklahoma State has always been, it's always a good offensive team. And I know Jimmy probably won't want to admit this, but he probably knew even for them to win, they were probably going to give up some points because that team's just too good offensively. You're not going to hold them down the whole game. So I think to get behind and know they were going to have to be chasing points was probably a difficult place for them to be in. Certainly if they could have gotten a field goal or a touchdown right away on that opening drive, or even answered on the second drive, I think maybe things would have normalized a little more. Maybe they would have been a little more aggressive right away. It's really interesting that I think second half they kind of knew. Second half, I think they felt more comfortable taking the deep shots. I know I had called for that. Several other people were calling for that. But
what really was surprising was the amount of quarterback power they ran with Mark. It wasn't like Amar and Angel weren't having success. It felt
Amar had that 40-yard run to end the quarter. I mean, at one point he was out rushing. Granted, it was mostly on the 40-yard run, but at one point he was out rushing Gordon, who had twice as many carries.
Right.
I mean, and plus we know with Mark's history of injury, I mean, it's been the last 2 years, they've really saved the quarterback run game till the playoffs, which I think makes perfect sense. You don't want to risk this guy. And I know this game means a lot to them. I know Jimmy I'm sure everybody on that team really wants this FBS win, especially against a real, full disrespect to my alma mater intended, and full disrespect to Kansas, who was bad at the time they played them. Those were not great FCS teams. This is a win that really catapults you into a different place if you beat Oklahoma State. But I think the humbling bit, I think it's definitely for the fan base. And, even some of us around here, we knew this team was going to be different, but there was still, I think we see, okay, this is what a really high-level FBS team. I think this team's better than Colorado, just for the record, but we'll see. Those things play themselves out over time. I think it's more humble. I think the team has a pretty good grip of all these things. I know Jimmy does. I think he was prepared for whenever that first loss was going to come, and even especially if it was this game, I think he knew. I think they have a pretty, I think they just knew. Like I said, I don't know if they needed a humbling. I just think they kind of knew. It's just been it's been a while. It's been a while since the loss, and you really once you got on paper, and once you can talk about the matchups on paper. I referenced and looked. I showed a lot of video of last year when Oklahoma State got hammered at home by Southern Alabama, who, frankly, last year's SDSU team would have ran both those teams. If Oklahoma State had played like that against last year's SDSU team, it might have been 50-7.
Right.
So I showed that video a lot, and I made that comparison. But it's a new year. They're older. They have a 6th, 7th year quarterback, 4th, 5th year lineman. You can talk about these things on paper, but then you get into a game and you see them on the field, and you're like, yeah, these guys are really good. And I remember a real backbreaker series. I thought the defense played, even though they gave up the 21 in the third quarter, which, of course, they were making a little light on the broadcast of that stat about how they only gave up 14 in the third quarter of all last year. Okay, that's not really applicable when you didn't play an FBS team like this, but I thought the backbreaker was on that opening series. I think it was the opening series. Maybe it was the second one. I think it was the first one now. There was like a 3rd and 9 where they had Bowman beat. I mean, like they had them. It defensed well. He was scrambling, and he just flings it, and then Bowman comes back across the field and makes a diving catch for a 10-yard gain. And then I think the next play they hit that touchdown to Gordon where they review. I didn't think the touchdown was a touchdown. I think he was down early. Probably wouldn't have mattered. They would have been down at the 1, and then he scores the next play. But
the replay angles in that place were absurdly bad. That's a P4. What is we don't even have a camera on the goal line.
With a lot of money that's been pumped in over the years, thanks to Mr. Pickens on that one. He's been the sugar daddy of that program. So I don't know. That was bizarre. But those, and I had a soundbite from Jimmy after the game. I know it went on the broadcast from the radio. He just said, there were a lot of times in this game we just looked, and we looked at our iPads, and we were draped all over them in coverage, and they just made a play. I mean, you tip your cap. That was a moment where I saw in that game, I'm like, this probably is not going to get – even though they came back, to SDSU's credit, right after that touchdown, they came back and they hit those 3 quick hitters, and then they hit the touchdown and get within 24-13. You're like, all right, this could be a game. It was a theme you hit on. They just couldn't quite get off the field. But a lot of the time in the second half, I thought they had it defensed better than they did in the first half. I thought they made good adjustments. That's a team that's talented enough to make plays on an FCS team, no matter how good that FCS team is. And, again, that's where I say a lot of it, you just got to tip your cap. But I think against FCS competition, SDSU is going to win a lot of those battles more often than not.
Dan, Nebraska didn't have goal line cameras either. They didn't. That was 2010, I think.
2013. Well, it was 2013, and then I think 2011 or 10. So
13 years ago. So
we're
world's come a long way since then.
We're slated to find out. I mean, tentatively, I say this because we don't know what the college landscape could look like any minute, because it changes every year. But they're tentatively scheduled to play at Nebraska, I think, in 2028 and 29 back to back. So, we'll find out if Nebraska. By then, I would think the technology would be there that you could have a robot on the goal line or just have a laser on the goal line to.
Well, yeah, by then we might not have first down markers anymore. Yeah, there is a lot of good things, and like you said, there's a lot of plays you just tip your hat. I mean, when Ollie Gordon comes out, I thought the defense did a really good job of pursuit to the ball and gang tackling on Ollie Gordon, and that's what made his life so difficult, because when he got somebody one-on-one matched up, man, he was getting by him, and he's just that caliber of guy. He's just that caliber of dude, and I was pretty happy with how the defense did against him. He's going to get his yards, he's going to get his touchdowns, and he did. Offensively, I think there's a lot to like offensively too. The offense was able to move ball down the field. Like you said, Griffin Wilde, my God, that kid had a day. I think the receiving core is plenty talented. Graham Goring also looked good. Hit the tight ends once or twice. Not a lot, not as much as maybe you'd hope, but they look good. Angel Johnson is going to bust some big yards. And what really was impressive about him to me was, man, he is not easy to break. For being smaller built, that kid runs tough just on the kickoff returns. Watching him, I mean, he's dragging dudes on kickoffs. And Amar was great. Amar he looked the part of a dude, and he's going to be. I'm excited to see what he does this year. The offensive line, I think part of the issues in the first half as well was that 3-3-5 is kind of an odd defense, and when you're a veteran line, I think the 3-3-5 isn't that effective. But when you've got a young, new, gelling offensive line, it leads to confusion. One play that distinctly stands out was Christensen just didn't block a guy, and he turns around and from his hand gestures and stuff, it looked like he expected somebody else to block him. It was just essentially a blown coverage for the offensive line. And as the game went on, you could see okay, they were starting to get it. They were starting to pick up the blitzes, everything else. They got better as the game went on, which is really good, because basically, if you listen to Gundy's interview during the game, he was not going to let off the gas. He essentially said, we're keeping our foot on the throttle. We will not let this team come back on us. When they asked about bringing out Ollie Gordon and everything, and they didn't, and they really didn't let their foot off the gas, but they did. Dan says when Gundy's throwing a flea flicker at us in the third with that big of a lead, they're taking it serious. When a ranked FBS team is doing that at all to an FCS team, that they're not screwing around, that they were ready, game plan. They didn't do some bland game plan. They brought in the real deal for this game. They weren't just taking it off.
Yeah, I there's where I got to credit him too. I mean, I did kind of. That's always a thing you wonder about when a good FCS team goes to play, or especially the elite level FCS teams go to play FBS. Is you wonder how serious they take it. I know I've heard the story. Gene Taylor, who of course was the ex NDSU athletic director, had gone to Iowa. Of course, now he's at Kansas State as their athletic director, but he had just gone to Iowa and taken an assistant role there. And of course, that year they were playing NDSU was 2016. And Taylor goes in there and he's trying to tell the players for Iowa, which included, oh, by the way, George Kittle, who's pretty good, and a couple other future pros. And he's trying to warn them, you got to take these guys seriously. They're good. They've beaten a lot of really good teams. The FCS thing doesn't matter. And he says, I told them all this, but you can see the look in their eyes that, yeah, they don't buy this. This is just we're going to kill these guys. This is a cupcake. And of course, NDSU ended up winning that game. So but that's kind of common. I think that happens a lot in these FCS matchups, because it's just, you don't go to a school, especially at a power conference. You don't go to these schools to play South Dakota State and North Dakota State. That's you don't pay attention to the FCS. They probably think this is Division II. So, unless you have a friend or something who was on those teams. But I kind of wondered, okay, where's Gundy in their head at? Because they had the they had the kind of glib comment after the DUI, I'm going to let him carry the ball 50 times. Well, we knew that wasn't true, but I'm like, is he taking SDSU seriously here? And then so much of the commentary and the coverage around them has been about, NIL stuff. And granted, again, similar thing if you're in the media out there, you don't know anything about South Dakota State. You're not going to spend as much time as you would as if they were playing Oklahoma or if it was Bedlam. But I just wondered how focused are they going to be on playing? And they were. They took the Jackrabbits seriously. I didn't see a team that was distracted. They had everything. And you're right, deep into the game. And I'll say this too. Another thing I know there's been some criticism. I think I've seen of Jimmy that he didn't pull starters earlier. I know Mark was taking a few shots, which is another reason I'm a little wondering about why they ran the quarterback stuff so much. But I really, he faked a punt in the fourth quarter when the game was essentially, you kind of saw the writing on the wall. It was probably over. They were running some of the.
Sorry,
I'm guessing
3 sacks in a row.
Yep, I'm seeing the Montana game too now.
And they were down by 5 with a minute 38 left, and they got sacked 3 times.
Yeah, it's a good effort though for Missouri State. I mean, obviously they have a lot of they've taken a lot of heat this year because of they're making. I mean, not so much because they're making the FBS move, but because they haven't been any good or really worthy of it. And this is a good start. We'll see. I mean, that somebody gave them a first place vote in the preseason poll. Maybe they know what they're talking about. I don't know. I don't know who it was. I don't have a vote in said poll, but no, I mean, what I was getting to with Jimmy was, like I said, they had that fake punt, even though it didn't work. They ran some stuff with Chase Mason. Again, didn't work, but they're still going for it. I like that. My respect for him went up because there's a lot, and I think we kind of knew this about Jimmy anyway, but there's plenty of this was his first loss as a head coach. I mean, he's lost games before as a coach, but a head coach nonetheless. I mean, he did not concede. I mean, he kept going for that. I think that is why you see such an intense loyalty with the players. And I've said this, and I know everybody, I always hear the people up in Fargo, they're saying, well, you're going to end up just like us. The transfer portal is going to come. You're going to get bored of winning national titles if you win a bunch. Like, well, you can't compare the two situations because there are fundamental differences. And I think one of them is a guy like Rodgers because I think Stig was kind of that grandfather/father figure that everybody wanted to play for. I think Rodgers is almost kind of like a brother figure to them because he's not that far removed from playing himself and he's younger. So I think if you're a player and you see that, and even though, like I said, I do think you have to kind of tightrope a little bit with removing players when it's a blowout or you're getting beat because you don't want to risk that injury. And they did come away healthy as far as we know. Or I haven't heard of a major injury unless you have.
Yeah,
but
no, I haven't heard of anything.
I think that is something that those players that makes them probably want to go to the mattresses for him even more. That even in a situation where it's probably not going to happen, that guy is still throwing the kitchen sink trying to win this game even when there's no concession. So I think that's impressive to me. Like I said, there's some things you can certainly criticize, and I think the game, but I do think, for a guy who just lost his first game, there's a lot of stuff in there. I think you can say, man, this is you can see why there's a lot of people nationally who are starting to catch on that this is a pretty. I don't know if this means this might not. I don't think he's going to be here as long as Stig. I'm just going to leave it at that. Whether he's whether he goes to college or the NFL, I'll just leave it at that. The second one would not shock me either.
Right. Well, I want to say what's up, Alex. What up, Rev? I'm glad you guys are here in time. You are here in perfect time for me to live read Alex's tweets from during the game. So I'm going to start off with the first quarter. No, I'm just kidding.
Are they as entertaining as me when I'm watching the Chiefs and it's the Super Bowl? I think I had about 100 during that.
No, he's pretty level-headed.
My coworker Adam Huntimer likes to make fun of me, and he's like, "I think you had about 150 tweets during that Super Bowl," and I'm like, "Well, it's, I try to say I'm not nervous about it, but, I still do,
Yeah.
So that's where you can see me fan out.
Right. But what you were saying about Jimmy and pulling starters and stuff like that, I totally get where you're coming from there. As a fan, you're like, well, this is done. Get Chase some reps, all that stuff. But on the other hand, you love to see that is, your coach is the heartbeat of your program, right? He's the one who sets the tone, everything like that. That competitive drive to never give up on a game is something you want. And let's be honest, we got Augustana coming up. We've got a couple other games this year that are going to end up being out of hand. Get Chase in then. You'll have time to get him in. Yes, it would have been nice to get him some FBS experience. But in the end, it is what it is. I'm not mad about it. Sure, I would have liked Chase to maybe get another drive or two in there just to get him the reps. But in the end, I don't have a problem with a coach who is never giving up on a game like that. I have no problem with that at all. Will it bite us someday? It might. Kevin Marshall from SCS Nation Radio saying, how about them dogs? You know what, Kevin? Today and today only, I will call them the Citadel. Big win, won the wildest, one of the wildest trophies there is out there for rivalries. I don't know if you saw that, Zach. It's a Low Country Boil trophy.
I was hearing again. I apologize.
They actually filled it. They filled it with a Low Country boil, which is wild. So that was cool.
I'm going to show my experience because I haven't been out there very often. What is Low Country Boil?
It's probably something that's
like a
not
gumbo?
as good as Texas barbecue. No, it's like a shrimp boil type of deal.
I was hearing something. Once the SDSU, I had this nice window, but I kind of stayed on the SDSU game. I wanted to watch CSU Texas, but then I very quickly tuned it out after they were like down 10-0 within the first quarter. They weren't too far down, and then I gave up on it when I saw them make a Manning look like he was Patrick Mahomes, and I'm like, oh, God, okay, whatever. So, but yeah, after the Jackrabbit game, then I did have to start getting busier because we had more crawfish boil. Nice. We did have more games. I mean, it was kind of a crazy night with Dakota Bowl and a couple other games. Getting a feed. I even managed to get Mountain Marty football highlights, which I did not think would happen, but that's pretty cool. So, it got really, it was nice to have the block of time to devote to the SDSU game, but then that will not happen again very often because I'll be running around getting every other school. And I do think I won't have stuff. Yeah, I do think we won't have many early shows, which will work nice this first month because obviously SDSU has 2 6:00 games. A lot of people have those.
Those will show the real degenerates who jump in. We should just call this show the Degenerates and then go.
Yeah, that'll be fun. We had the one late kickoff we had last year with Montana. Not to mention how crazy that game was. That'll be interesting. But we'll see. We'll see what Incarnate Word. I haven't seen their score in a while.
They won 28-7 over Northern Colorado.
I know that was a game. I know that was a game for a while. So, we'll see.
Which is surprising. But
you'd like to think eventually Northern Colorado is going to figure something out. That's right. I don't know. They've been such a dumpster fire, and I still kind of remember them from the days of. I guess Montana State and Utah Tech is still going somehow. But I guess that's out west. But yeah, no, I still have love for Northern Colorado when they were a D2 power with Joe Glenn when I was growing up out there. And I'd like to think eventually they can figure something out, but
you have the tradition that they have. You'd think that eventually you're gonna get it going again, but
it's just
God, who knows?
They're just so buried there. Even some of the Division II schools in Colorado have, like CSU Pueblo has won a national title. I think Colorado Mesa out in Grand Junction has been a good team. So it's like, but yeah, they're just kind of buried because you have Colorado, you have Air Force, Colorado's, even Wyoming is close to them, so they're kind of a team in there as well, and then some decent D2s. And they don't really have a great facility. Nottingham Field was good for Division II, but it's. I mean, their basketball facility. We used to call it used to be called the Butler Hancock facility, and we called it the Buttcock. So, I mean, it's just they don't have a good situation. But I guess we're coming up on 40 minutes here. This is the Jackrabbit postgame show, the Jackrabbit Illustrated postgame show. Utah Tech, getting an update on Utah Tech. Now, I guess kind of as we start to wrap up a little bit of the NDSU discussion, I guess the only other positives, I know you mentioned the pass rush. I think they always kind of start the season slow. They don't ever get a whole lot of sacks early on. It seems like that usually comes along as the season progresses. I think back to the Montana game last year when they really put it on the Grizz at the end there. I mean, that, they just, for whatever reason, this team just doesn't get a whole lot of sacks in the early part of the season. So and again, that was a very good offensive line. So, I think we
can get Sicko's committee to jump on. That'd be hilarious. That would be amazing.
Pretty fun. Yeah. I kind of wish they would have run Amar and Angel a little more. But like I said, I think once Oklahoma State got out to that lead and then they were chasing points, I think that kind of changed the game plan. And some of that first half game plan may have been, sometimes you play offense to play defense a little bit, because I think maybe they wanted to run some clock, because I think they knew how much of a task it was. Like I said, I thought the defense played well in spaces, but they knew the defense was going to really be up against it. And I think the fear you get is that you go 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out, and then you're just constantly putting and with that was the other thing we haven't discussed. The tempo that you saw Oklahoma State wanted to go with, plus the heat. I mean, that was a lot. So I think this was maybe that first half they were wanting as much to play a thing where, okay, let's control some clock. Let's make sure our defense is getting rested because we can't have them constantly on the field. Second half, I think then they're like, okay, now we're down. We really have to start airing this thing out.
Lordy. Sorry. I fully agree with you on that might have been the strategy, because let's be honest, up tempo against us and scheduling that game at 1 in the afternoon against us was not a mistake. That was on purpose. They were trying to wear us out, trying to wear us down, give themselves every advantage.
Well, was that them or was that the networks that did that?
That was them. That was ESPN Plus. It wasn't on any network. So
I don't know if Oklahoma State had any control of the kickoff time. Like I think the networks, because I don't know how that works. Because I know once the networks chose not to televise it, I mean, because if the networks had wanted to televise it, they'll pick the time essentially.
Right.
But I think that there's a bad break too. I mean, if this game had been later in the day or been a Thursday night, maybe that helps just a little bit. But again, I think mostly
of bad breaks. Sam Herder just tweeted out Tommy Malott needs help off the field from the trainers after a short touchdown run. He was down on the ground for a while and looked like both legs were getting stretched like you would when you get cramps, but certainly concerning seeing two trainers help him get off the field. My God, if that is not a song and dance we haven't seen before, man, I obviously hope he's okay, but God, that guy can't stay healthy.
And this year, you don't know what their backup situation is because they don't have Chambers. And now Chambers is an assistant on the team, more or less. Although we can't really talk because they didn't run Gronowski nearly as much. But boy, I mean, you can't. And I've had this discussion again in my role as both an NDSU antagonist and a constant overbearing Chiefs fan, which I love to play. I've had this thing where I've talked about when I make this pro comparison with Allen and Mahomes, and people are always like, well, Josh Allen is better because look at how great of a runner he is. I'm like, yeah, but I wouldn't want my quarterback running that much because you're taking more punishment. I mean, a guy like Mahomes and a guy like Gronowski, they can run. They're good runners. But what we saw with Gronowski after the injury and what we've seen with a guy like Mahomes, they do it when they've mostly done it when they had to, or they've done it in the playoffs when obviously you put everything on the line to win a championship. The guys who run constantly like Malott or like an Allen, even if they don't get hurt and miss games, it adds up.
Those hits add up on you.
Yeah, I mean you're gonna be dinged up, and it's just like it's constantly just I would not want. So I'm a little. That's a reason I'm a little surprised they ran so much quarterback stuff today. But I mean, we'll see with Montana State. I like Tommy. I think he's a gamer. He's a great quarterback, but a great player. But I don't know. I don't know what Vigen's is. When Vigen was the offensive coordinator at NDSU, he had Brock Jensen, and Jensen was built like a tank. He could take a lot more of that punishment. It's just he doesn't have, and Chambers was too. Although Chambers got hurt, I thought his injury in the semifinal with SDSU was a key one because he looked pretty good in that. If he doesn't go out, maybe that game's a little closer. But you just don't. He's trying to. I don't know if he's fitting his system to his players or he's trying to make his players fit to the system. But that's unfortunate. I can't really think of much else on the SDSU game. I would have liked to see more runs with those two, but I'm really encouraged by that. Maybe some slight concerns with the secondary, but again, I don't think those receivers are going to be. Let's give them a little pass on the receivers. I think next week with Incarnate Word, I mean, that was a closer game than expected. So it's a team that I'll put it like this: 2 years ago, because I think they had Cam Ward as their quarterback 2 years ago, didn't they?
Yes.
So, and we saw him light it up today for Miami against Florida.
And their style of play, I mean, they're a dangerous team. It's going to be a good test because, the secondary did they didn't struggle. The pass defense struggled just because of the amount of time and everything else. So it's going to be a good test for the defense against a team like that. That is a high-powered FCS offense compared to what Oklahoma State is, which is a whole different world. So
you're right. It was war. We were getting corrections here from Dustin and Kenkel. It was Lindsey Scott 2 years ago. Lindsey Scott was good too. Lindsey Scott was good
terrible,
too.
Wasn't he?
Ward was 3. Well, the thing I was going to say though, had SDSU in that title game 2 years ago, I think that would have been a tougher game for them than North Dakota State. Because I think
I said that before NDSU even played Incarnate Word, that I was rooting for NDSU because SDSU matched up way better with NDSU than they did with Incarnate Word. I still think they beat Incarnate Word, but that would have been a much tighter and more heart-stopping game with Incarnate Word.
And I think, I kind of remember Incarnate got screwed a few. It was in the Fargo Dome, so nobody. That's a tough. Yeah. You can't expect you're going to get calls, and I think Incarnate missed a few opportunities, but. Yeah, that would have been, we all wanted to see the SDSU NDSU title game, and I think for the Jackrabbits to be, it makes their current run more legitimate that they had to go through NDSU to get the title, but that was not a great NDSU team. Even though they had won a very close game in Fargo. The Bison were a little more banged up too. They didn't have Lipke, who was out for the title. I don't know if he played, but he wasn't at full strength. If he did, he'd get any time. We kind of knew going. Incarnate Word would have presented them with some headaches that they, and Cam Miller's a better player now than he was 2 years ago too. So, it just that I'm very curious to see what UIW brings. I still think SDSU is going to be more physical and probably overwhelm them at some point. And to be fair, I think today they might have been caught looking a little bit ahead. You go there and you've heard all this time that Northern Colorado's garbage, and you probably just think you're going to go in and walk and get a cakewalk, and it was not. So we'll see. But it's going to be a tough task. I've said this. I think SDSU's schedule this year is. As much as some people don't like having a Division II team on there, it's tough to get when you have especially a 12-game schedule. Tough to get a full Division I schedule. I really liked it. I mean, you get Oklahoma State. Incarnate Word has been a playoff team. Even Southeast Louisiana has been a playoff team, and they're going to go on the road for that one. So it's, other than, and, again, even the Division II thing, at least it's a local team. And it was a team that won a conference title a year ago into the boots. So,
right.
And I think Augie will still be somewhat good this year. I don't think they're quite as good as they were a year ago. So even then it wouldn't have presented the same kind of test, but it's a good schedule. Like other years, I don't think you necessarily get this kind of schedule, but it's a good schedule for them. And I think they'll definitely,
So,
I love the IRI. It's
so
comment
there. On the Incarnate Word game, I don't know if there is a return game for SDSU to Incarnate Word, but I would assume so.
I think I was told it was just a one because I think I asked about that last year. I asked about that last year. I heard it was a one-off, but maybe they have.
Okay.
They certainly could. I mean, it'd be nice to go down to. I think it's San Antonio or near there. So, but
well,
yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised going forwards in the future if you've already got a relationship with a program that is perennially a top 25 program, and we all know about the struggles of scheduling FBS games for SDSU. It might be, that might be something we see in the future as a home and home with them. But speaking of Augie and that game being scheduled, I'm curious of your opinion on this because I saw that scheduled and I know SDSU does not want Augie as a D1 school. Do you think that signals that Augie's kind of done for the time being, done with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't ever want to close the door on that, but I mean, the hockey, they had a lot of success with the, excuse me, still got a frog in my throat. I think they had a lot of success with the hockey. Anybody who's been in Sioux Falls or seen it, that Midco Arena on their campus is beautiful. And frankly, if they go Division I, I don't know where that leaves the football program because I mean, look at what we just saw happen to St. Thomas the other night. St. Thomas, for those of you who are joining us, lost to Sioux Falls, the University of Sioux Falls, and didn't just lose; they got thumped. It was 34-13. And now Sioux Falls normally has been St. Thomas has normally had like a 31-game win streak, so they're non-scholarship, but that was a powerhouse program. And Sioux Falls is coming off a 3-8 year. Now we expect them to be better in their head coaches in his second year, but it just shows you go into the Pioneer League, even as great as St. Thomas was in Division III, and they'd still be building a great D2 team, I think.
Well,
it's just such a.
Let's
I
be
just
honest
don't
about
know.
The Pioneer League in St. Thomas. I mean, St. Thomas has done well there, but they also they got housed by Drake last year.
They host Northern Iowa, I think, next week.
They do host Northern Iowa, which is a lesser version of what SDSU did a little bit playing in Minneapolis against Drake, except you get to not have to pay St. Thomas to come down.
There was actually a year where SDSU was going to play in Des Moines against Drake. I think they bought that one out. So
yeah,
it's kind of interesting.
Drake is one that drives me nuts. I think if you're going to pick a Pioneer team, that if they decided they wanted to be, you actually picked a Pioneer League school that wanted to be scholarship, you'd pick Drake. They've got the stadium for it because of the Drake relays. Yeah. So they've got a big enough stadium.
Great old time stadium too. They've refurbished it a lot, but it's like a classic one. I do want to.
I can't stand it. Yeah.
I don't know if I should post the link in here. You can. We do have today's SDSU highlights on the show.
Oh yeah.
They are on dakotanewsnow.com. So we had some good looking video. I actually got a nice little still of Graham. Is it Gehring or Goring? I think it's Gehring. Got a really nice still of his catch. And by the way, we have a YouTube site this year too. So usually the day after it's posted.
What's the title that's posted under? Is it just in sports?
Well, I know we tweeted it out on our Dakota News Now page. I think it's just Oklahoma State overwhelms or something. Yeah. But yeah, and I'll probably retweet it here on my Twitter page. I know I retweeted our link here, but yeah, those highlights are out. Like I said, really got to thank SDSU's athletic. Chris McDaniel is usually the guy. If you check out SDSU's stuff, he is usually the guy who shoots the majority of that, and he is just phenomenal. And I'm retweeting those highlights now too. We're gonna have other highlights online later as well. I'm working through that as we chat here, but yeah, some really good stuff there. Like I said, if you followed me over the years, I take a lot of pride and it's not just the Jacks; it's every team we have in this region. I mean, like I said, I got Mount Marty highlights tonight too, so I try to get everybody on the road here because there's pretty good passion for just about every college team in this region. But I take a lot of pride because I always like being on the sidelines because for one thing, I don't like all the chyrons and all the graphics you get when you're replaying on TV. But you just get a different, especially when you have HD TVs or screens, you get a different feel when you're watching everything unfold in front of you. I want you to feel like you're actually there, and you get a different feel when you're on the sidelines. So some really good video we got from our affiliate they're out of Lawton, Oklahoma, which is like 2 hours away from Stillwater. Some good video from them and really good video from Chris McDaniel and a soundbite as well from Jimmy. We'll run more, obviously, as the week progresses. Had they won, I would have done one of my nice little hype videos, but obviously, and I had a plan in mind, but that happens a lot. I had a plan in mind 2 years ago if they'd beaten Iowa, and it just didn't. I can't control such things. So, but and thank you, Dan, for. It's kind of nice. I did too. Yeah. Those. I appreciate that. It's been I do those kind of on my off time just to have some fun and keep myself sharp. So. And I can't air them anymore on the station because there's too much copyright in them.
Right. Well, they're awesome, and we love them. They are. And
I do get some compliments, by the way, from and I did one for full disclosure. I know we don't have any Coyote fans on here right now, but I did one for USD because my policy is you have to earn it. I'm not going to do one when you're 3-8. If the Jacks were 3-8 or 5-6, I'm not doing hype videos. That's just the way it is. So I did 2 hype videos, and they were fun. They're fun to produce, and hopefully I get to do a lot of those through the years because it means if I'm doing a lot of them, it means it's a great season. And last year was the best because we had a lot to hype, and as I've said, it was the best college season period I think in this region's history. Certainly for SDSU with the 15-0. The Coyotes had their season. Augie had its best season ever. NAIA, we had some good schools, and it's even despite today, it's a pretty good start. I mean, I think USF looking like they're maybe back, going up and beating St. Thomas. But yeah, like I said, we go down a lot of rabbit holes. I do think Augustana is probably out for the moment. I don't think they're ever going to close the door. Maybe another 10, 15 years. I really think they should just play their basketball games in that Midco arena. I don't like what they're doing. I don't understand. They've done this now for like a decade where they were playing at the Sioux Falls Arena. When they won their national title in men's basketball, they were at the arena. Then they moved to the Pentagon. I mean, nothing against those facilities, but just keep it on campus. I mean, I would rather they play in the Elman Center, but it just feels like it's so detached to be that far off campus. And now you have this. I mean, I realize hockey is going to be the number one priority. They'll get the number one say, but when they're not playing there, I mean, I'm sure it wouldn't cost significantly more to convert it to a basketball arena. I don't know the processes, but either way, I think they need to play back on. Like if they wanted to go to the Summit League, Midco Arena is their ticket because that would instantly, if they made that a basketball arena, it would instantly be one of the top ones in the Summit League. Right now, although the Summit League is getting better with its basketball arenas, I'll give it that.
Yes,
but yeah, I think and I will say this though, I kind of asked Nielsen this in regards to would you? And I'll ask Jimmy this the week of the Augustana game. I'm like, well, if you have to play these D2 games, would you rather play the regional teams, the in-state teams, whether it's Northern, Augie, USF, Southwest? And he kind of mentioned that I think but this was a bit of a unique year. You had a 12-game schedule, so usually you're not going to necessarily have as many openings to do that, which is a good point. Because usually when you only have 3 non-conference games, it fills up pretty quick. But the other thing that kind of bears watching too is the NSIC adds another team next year in Jamestown. So I don't know. Before that, they had to play just nothing but conference games. They might have to go back to that. I don't know. I hope they keep a non-conference game. But, I think this could just be a one-off, and it could because it was a 12-game season. And right now the NSIC allows them to play a non-conference game. But once you go back to 11 and once the NSIC expands again, I don't know that they're going to have enough to – I don't know if the opportunities are going to be there. Ooh, Tennessee Tech's got a lead.
There was a bunch of games today that the FCS
are you telling me,
almost had upsets. I mean, Idaho genuinely seriously threatened Oregon all day. Central Arkansas lost on the final second by a incomplete pass getting overturned on review into a completed pass. And then, God, who was it I was watching? Abilene Christian lost to Texas Tech in overtime by 1.
I think Western Carolina was hanging with North Carolina State.
Western Carolina hung with them. UC Davis looked really good against Cal for quite a while, and I stopped watching. They fell behind. Robert Morris led Utah State for a little while, which I don't know if you saw the tweet I retweeted. That has quite possibly the nicest interception I've ever seen. It was
look at it.
Incredible. Now we got Tennessee Tech up over 25-24.
Zach, are you telling me a Conference USA team is struggling in the vaunted FBS?
Tennessee Tech. But, if anything, man, NDSU plays Tennessee Tech next. Yeah, Jackson State.
No, it's Tennessee State.
ULM. Oh, it's Tennessee State. That's right.
That's Eddie George's team,
right.
Yeah.
Silly me. That's me screwing up the HBCUs again. I'm going to hear about it from Zach now.
I'm a little surprised that they're playing this late. Tennessee, I guess it's Conference USA. They love to play their games on Tuesday and Wednesday. So I guess, for them to play a game in Tennessee this late.
Third. Weber's only losing 14-0 in the third to Washington.
Yeah, and Washington. Yeah, I've got that game actually on right over my shoulder. And so some of you might be getting some free Big Ten Network if you can see it. You gotta have,
that is on over.
You gotta have pretty good. You gotta have pretty good eyes if you're gonna see it because it's, in my big head blocks.
Yeah, some places had weather delays. I remember seeing the video of the.
I'm guessing that's why. Yeah, obviously we dealt with that on Thursday with Minnesota's game with North Carolina and then the St. Thomas USF game. So I guess we should take this opportunity.
Nichols put up a fight against Louisiana Tech too, 25-17.
Pretty good week for the.
Sorry.
Pretty good week for the FCS. I suppose we should take this moment because we probably won't be on too much longer, although we tend to go. But we should probably take a little moment to hit on that other big FCS FBS game in the Valley between North Dakota State and Colorado.
One quick thing I forgot to do. I do have to do one last read for Cubby's Sports Bar and Grill in Brookings, South Dakota, the number one sports bar in Brookings, or honestly the state. They're my favorite sports bar in the whole state. Get up there for some Chislik. They've got the best beer. They still got the patio open. They will for the first couple of games. If you don't have a tailgate spot, don't want a tailgate, go down to Cubby's. I know a ton of people do that. Go there after the game and get your beers to celebrate the win. And if we're on the road, you can't go to the game, get to Cubby's. They've got wall-to-wall TVs there. And they'll have all the Jacks games on. Go ahead and check out Cubby's in downtown Brookings.
We're not going 3 hours, Adam. I promise. He's got a fan. My wife and son are.
He's getting more and more excited about this.
We do that in the playoffs. Come on,
that's
or
right.
after a rivalry game.
That's right.
But I think the NDSU game kind of went mostly as expected. I thought, I thought NDSU would hang with them. I kind of thought Colorado would pull away, which they were close to doing. And then Dion damn near gave it back to them a couple of times. I'm convinced, I think Cam Miller, boy, I know last year there were some in Fargo who said Cam Miller should really be up for the Peyton, and I didn't agree, but he looks like he could really – it could really be between him, Gronowski, and, we'll see who else emerges. But Peyton Cam Miller really looked like he could be a Peyton guy. I think he looks very improved. I have no idea why they keep trying to do this stupid Cole Peyton package. They keep
they gotta let it die. I mean,
they've
Matt Frazee, who's one of the originators of the FCS Fans Nation, went through and went, what does Cole Payton do better than Cam Miller? I mean, he's slightly faster, slightly bigger, except he can't throw the ball. So what advantage are you gaining from him in there? Sure, you get a highlight long run once in a while, but let's be honest, when has he done that against a high-level team with regularity? He's cost them more games than he's won them, that's for damn sure.
It's when you play a big boy team, they know what's coming, and they can. I mean, even Colorado, I know they're kind of a mishmash with the transfers, but they've got. It's not like they're putting out Division II guys. They know what they're doing. Until he shows better that he's more of a quarterbacking threat, you're going to load up for the run when he runs. And against the lesser teams or against teams that are beat up, sure, but it's not. I remember granted he was younger. But you want to know where maybe the 2022 season completely flipped was that SDSU NDSU game where, of course, Cam got that penalty where they would have been right down to the goal line, and it was that bow and arrow thing. But I think the next play or something right after it, they put in Peyton, and he tries this bizarre jump pass, which SDSU intercepts in the end zone. If NDSU just runs normal plays, they would go up, I think, 2-3 times. Would have been 28-7, I think.
Yes.
I mean, the Jacks were great, but I don't think they come back from that in Fargo. And are we talking about a much different season, a different outcome if South Dakota State doesn't win that game in Fargo? I don't know. But I just don't. It's something, and I will be in, and Garrett's saying they haven't yet done this because I like the way they used Mason today. They lined him up at wide receiver. They had him run a reverse, but they didn't take Gronowski off the field. You don't take your best player off the field, especially when he's in the zone and you have a chance to win the game. It made no sense. But they have a new coaching staff there too, new offensive coordinator. They're trying to figure it out. And I think one thing that I tweeted out as I go on a rant here, one thing I tweeted out was it's kind of interesting how they've always shortchanged Cam Miller. Because I didn't really think much of him up until last year. Last year was when I really noticed, okay, he's improved. Like he's genuinely a really good FCS quarterback now. But you think back, the first year he was in was the spring year, and it was the weird year. And of course, they don't count that year because they didn't win, which, whatever. But he's only really in there. Why do we have a countdown clock on?
It's the rant timer. I think Chad installed it for me.
Well, it was a little late, but I guess, yeah.
I had to find it. I didn't know where it was.
It's great. No, that first year, it was like, well, he's not really that good, but, whatever, this year doesn't count. They kind of discounted him, even though I thought he was, in hindsight, he was all right for what he gave them that year because he kind of rescued him. Zeb Nolan was just ineffective for them that first year. And, of course, I think they're still kind of bitter over the fact that year cost them Trey Lance. Obviously, the fact it was played in the spring, he opts out. If COVID doesn't happen, they think they would have had their best team ever that following year, and they might be right. They had a lot of NFL prospects. But the following year, it was going to be Quincy Patterson, the Virginia Tech transfer, the different breed. He's going to be – we haven't seen a player like this athleticism in Fargo. He couldn't throw the ball. He was terrible. Terrible is a stretch, but he wasn't great. And then Cam Miller comes in. That wasn't a great season for Cam Miller. And, if SDSU had made the title game, hadn't had so many games where they had kind of – obviously, we know about the Vermiracle and some of the other games that they kind of let slip. Maybe if SDSU played him in the title game, they would have beaten him. But nonetheless, Cam Miller led them to a national title. But even the following year, they were talking about Cole Payton's one of the best quarterbacks we've ever recruited out of Omaha. I think he might have come from the same school as Easton Stick in high school.
Yep.
It's like they've talked about him being the guy who was going to unseat Cam Miller, and it's just never happened. And then coming into this year, the talk is he is the Tim Tebow option. They're going to experiment and put him in all these different – it's like, why? Okay, I get it the first couple of years with Miller, but now we know what Cam Miller is now. Let's stop trying to replace him when we know what he is, and he's pretty damn good. It feels like they just punish him because he's not Trey Lance, he's not Easton Stick, he's not Carson Wentz. I mean, he's never going to be as good as those three historically, but he's still a pretty damn good quarterback. He'll probably get a shot in the NFL. I don't know if he gets drafted, but he'll go to a camp at the very least. He's a damn good FCS quarterback, but it's like he suffers because he's not one of their all-time great quarterbacks. He's not one of the guys who went 3-8 with them 10, 14 years ago. So I just, and again, the Peyton stuff will work against the crappier teams. It'll probably work next week against Tennessee State. It'll work against, whoever else, the bad teams. It'll work against most teams. It'll put up fantastic numbers. But if they don't wise up, it'll probably cost them maybe against SDSU when they play in the Fargo Dome, or worse, maybe in the playoffs if you run into the Jacks, or I gotta say suspicion. Let's say maybe USD is for real this year and is different, or maybe Idaho is really good because they keep thinking that nobody's ever going to catch them in Fargo. Well, the Jackrabbits caught you. Maybe somebody else will too. You just never know. I don't ascribe to that whole notion of they're so far above it, because I've seen one team catch them. Especially tonight watching Jason X's team, I wouldn't, like I said, I wouldn't stop trying to fix what is not broken. Let Cam Miller cook. And if Cole Payton wants to transfer, thank you. We appreciate you, but you're just not the best quarterback here right now. Go find another opportunity. I guess that's the end of my rant. And they say I hate the guys.
Right. Well, Cam Miller needs more respect on his name from NDSU fans. Like, yeah, SDSU fans give him crap. He's the opposing team's your biggest rivals, quarterback. That's going to happen. But man, that guy is, his life's almost, his college career is almost a movie. They keep bringing in people to replace him. He keeps winning the job back. He's got a national title, all this stuff. And then they're like, no, we're going to try to put another guy in for you occasionally. And it costs us a game.
And I'm sure the fact he's 0 against SDSU is weighing against that legacy too. If he beats the Jackrabbits in the game in Fargo, which could happen, we'll see. I think the Jacks have a good chance to go in there and win, but I think it's going to be a hell of a game at this pace. Those are the two biggest knocks on him are that he's not Trey Lance, Carson Wentz, or Easton Stick, and that hasn't beaten the Jackrabbits yet. And that's not entirely his fault either, because SDSU had better teams. Yeah, he made some mistakes in those games, but he would have had to play superhuman. I don't think those three quarterbacks I mentioned. People forget this, and I've heard this with NDSU. Like they said, that 2020 team, if they all stayed in, nobody touches them. Mm-hmm. Did everybody forget that when they came here for the game day game in 2019, the Jacks lost their starting quarterback and nearly beat them with a third-string true freshman who had never played a down of college football? They had the ball tied with a chance to take the lead. He throws a pick, and then they run for a 70-yard, 80-yard. To me, that's where everything really started. I've said that was a turning point, even though they lost. That was when they first started to physically match up with NDSU. But I'm like, for people who are saying, 2020, they would have just steamrolled everybody. I'm like, SDSU was coming. I don't know if they would have. I'm not saying they would have beaten that team, but it's like, if you're just thinking, Cam Miller's not Trey would have beaten him. Trey didn't have a great game. His worst game of that year was against the Jacks. He only threw for 85 yards. You wouldn't. I had people ask me, is he going to be a great pro quarterback? I'm like, I don't know. At the time, I'm like, I haven't really. I saw a little bit of him in Marshall, and the only game I saw him in person in Brookings, he was not impressive. The Jacks played a good game against him. So, and of course, his career, I don't think his pro career, it's not entirely his fault because he had an injury right off the bat, and then Brock Purdy came in and just played well, but it's one of those things where it's like Cam Miller just kind of gets, I think he's just constantly dissed because he's not the whole time. It's like being the guy who has to follow a great quarterback in the NFL. You're the guy who follows John Elway or whoever name any guy who comes out. The only place they get away with this is Green Bay, where they seem to have a great quarterback follow everybody. But yeah.
Yeah, but with what Zach says, Zach's right. I mean, you have a game with 12 yards. That is a supreme clunker of a passing game.
But those were earlier. A lot of those were earlier. Like last year, I thought last year was when I really saw the improvement. You're right. Early in his career, I mean, yeah, that, as I've said, I think that 2021 national title year, if they played SDSU again, they might have lost to the Jacks. I don't know. But yeah, I think last year was when I turned the corner on Miller. I'm like, I don't think he deserved to be top 3 in the Payton. And I know there were, I think somebody gave him a vote over Gronowski for number 1. I don't agree with that. But I turned the corner. I'm like, this guy's a dude. And watching him play against Colorado, I'm like, if he maintains that pace, he'll be at the awards banquet as a top finalist for that award.
Yeah. And, but we used to call him Cam Whiteclaw at JI, before last year instead of Cam Miller. But he's good now, so we call him Cam Miller. But
Whiteclaw is not the worst drink. I know my wife likes that drink, so I guess it's not the worst.
Right. I love him. I don't know how he does with ladies. Maybe
I got to say that hype video they put out this year that they deleted, that was probably his worst decision since the 12-yard pass.
Yeah, that shouldn't have been sent.
It's bad when it's bad when they go to all the trouble to put that together and they delete it within like an hours because we got ratio.
Yes. Something that is fun, we've got people in the comments arguing over top 5 placement for this week after this week's slate of games, all that jazz. How fun is it? It used to be in the middle of NDSU's run and JMU was here and everything. It was basically NDSU, JMU, and then, kind of the Jacks, but they hadn't done it, hadn't proved it. And then everybody else, it was who's going to rise up. And this year we've got 4 teams for sure. We just saw what Idaho did to Oregon, and that's tough for me because we see so many teams play well against an FBS team and then just flake out. But that doesn't feel fluky to me against Oregon. It feels like they're, and you got Montana, you got Montana State, SDSU, NDSU, possibly Idaho, maybe Villanova. Villanova was really good last year and kept everybody, really put it on Youngstown State for a while until they let them come back. It feels like with all the gnashing of teeth and wailing about the demise of FCS and there's no good teams left, this year has more potential national title teams than it ever has before. And, there usually is a SoCon team that'll pop up and be a quarterfinal, semifinal team. So who knows what happens there. It really feels like this might be the most competitive year across the FCS that we've seen in a while, which I'm pumped about.
Yeah. I mean, we're kind of in and especially me being in the media, we're kind of in an interesting cross section because obviously we know who, being in the Dakotas, the guys up north, we can't escape that. And that usually the train of this subdivision is so bad comes from them because they want to move to FBS. I'm not saying that it hasn't been watered down because obviously you've lost some unbelievable programs over the last 15, 20 years. But I agree with you. I think that there's, even just this week, whether these teams have all won, Idaho is coming. For Eck to do that, I fully expected them to get slaughtered. I mean, no FCS team goes to Oregon. Maybe I thought NDSU a couple of years ago, if they'd played that game in 2020, would have had a chance. But that's because he had to turn over a lot of his roster. I think he had another year where a bunch of people left, and he's going to constantly. And by the way, they mentioned in the broadcast, I don't think he's going to be there that much longer. I'm just somebody in the FB, somebody at the higher, we'll see. I mean, it strikes me that he really likes Idaho out there. So, that's kind of good. There are certain places which fit a guy, and I think that's a good fit for him. But there's going to be a program with deeper pockets that's going to, I think, come along and offer him, and, it depends on how high he wants to rise up. But they looked good. I mean, there's been a lot of, there's just been a lot of surprising, and I agree. I think there's a lot of teams that could emerge. I know I've kind of dumped on the SoCon a bit over the years and had some fun with the Fans Nation guys. But, maybe this is the year Furman, somebody breaks through. They haven't had a semifinalist since, I think, Georgia Southern back in 2012, and obviously that's team left. Furman could have done it last year. In fact, they, you could argue maybe they got screwed a little bit at Montana. Who knows if maybe Furman would have given NDSU a better game. Or maybe Furman would have given SDSU a better game. I doubt it. But this is one of the things we talked about last year. As fun as last year was, I think, for Jackrabbit fans, there's a little added element because you kind of knew that was inevitable. I mean, there were certain challenges along the way. I mean, obviously, USD, I mean, that provided a good subplot as good as they were. And, of course, we saw what ended up happening when they played. But that provided there were moments where, like, okay, could this team maybe step up and challenge them? You remember that Montana State game? Grab some water. Obviously, we thought maybe Montana State would be a long-term challenger, but they didn't. They just kind of had stuff that happened. But it was kind of inevitable that SDSU was going to win that title because they had so much experience. They had a lot of guys who ended up in NFL camps or will have NFL careers. And we kind of knew where that season was going. We don't really know. I mean, I still think it's probable that we're going to see a Valley team, either SDSU or NDSU, in the title game. It could well be another Valley Big Sky title game. That is very possible. I would even say that's very probable. But there is more parity this year, and I do think you're right. I think there's more contenders, and I don't think there's not that super powered team. Even though I think SDSU is going to be very good, I think NDSU is going to be very good. You just don't have the sure thing that we've had the last couple of years with teams that just look like they were unbeatable. And there's, like I said, I think there's some rising programs that I think there's a. By the way, it does look like Middle Tennessee just beat. They gave it away. Well, I've had my throat's been a little off ever since I had that case of pneumonia, so I still kind of deal with that a little bit, but I'm not quite. I'm working on it. It's been I have to talk for a living too, so I also kind of have to conserve, I guess. But no, I think it's going to be a fun season. I think for the FCS. Again, not many more thoughts on that Colorado game with NDSU. I think they really missed Cole Wisniewski. I think that's going to be if he returns, that's going to be that could be the wild card for whether they go all the way or whether they can. Because I don't think it would have necessarily beaten Colorado, but that dude was such a presence back there, especially in the playoffs last year. I think they miss him a lot. I think they miss the leadership. Even if he comes back in a limited role, it's one of those things where you need that. He's like a quarterback for their defense almost. So, I mean, that had to be torture watching that game for him. I think NDSU will still be NDSU. They're still going to be good.
Well, yeah, I think that's the reality of it. And there is more parity. One thing I did want to bring up, if you are looking to get into a Jacks game this year, you better get on it. I know we're talking to the degenerates here, so I'm preaching to the choir, but let your friends know, coworkers who aren't paying attention out there. I saw someone even post on the SDSU fans Facebook page that I think they overbooked for the Augustana game. Like, nobody, they've
been overbooking for about 2 years now.
Yeah, what's that even overbooked? This isn't a convention center. It's
Are we sure that wasn't an Augustana fan? I mean, obviously it's been a while since they played the Jacks, and
yeah, I don't
there
know.
Are a few, there are a few less seats than there were back in the day at Coughlin.
Yeah, and it's wild, and it's not Coughlin where they just keep stuffing them in there, and they'll sit there with a pusher, and I think if there was people in the way, they just stuff them in there and stuff them through. But if you are curious and enjoy following that stuff like me, Jack's fan went and made Green Dot Watch on Twitter. He's got he made a algorithm that goes into the sites
Pretty
and
cool.
counts how many.
Cool.
Yeah, how many green dots are left?
Right what I'm getting a kick out of is he's doing one for the SDSU NDSU game, and it's like,
yeah,
I don't know. I will get the ultimate kick, and I'm hoping I can go up to that one. I was up there 2 years ago, and I was up there for the playoff game in 19. I don't think it's possible, but God, it would be hilarious if there's like 3,000 or 4,000. If there was even if there were just 2,000 to 3,000 Jackrabbits. I know there's kind of this quote unquote boredom up there with everything, but man, if SDSU fans get even more blue, that would be. I'm going to laugh at that one because that would just be like, I can't imagine because it's going to be a nationally televised game. If there's one thing Fargo people still turn out for, it's the chance to be on national TV. And I appreciate you being a fan. I'm a fan too. If there's one thing that they love being on national, so I can't imagine they won't sell and it being
it'll sell out. I've been giving them crap now because they gave us crap for years. Well, the only way you sell it out is we show up. Well, oh my, well, how the turn.
I mean, that would be that's what I'm getting at. Yeah, that would be the ultimate turning of the tide if there ends up being. And when I worked in Fargo, I mean, like people told me, like, look, this is great when they win, but you know, there's bandwagoners too. There are people telling me the stories of when they played Augustana. I think they lost to Augustana, and the dome was like it was just a horrible atmosphere because it was half empty. It's like. Yep. Like, you know, so it's like, but we haven't seen that now for, you know, almost 20, getting on 30 years. You know, I was there the last year I was there, they went 3-8. So, and it definitely, they were not selling the place out. And now they're, you know, now they're obviously getting bored, even though this is a time where they're competitive with people. And yeah, I see Garrett saying, disagree a little on Wisniewski. I'm not saying he would have made the difference.
I think he would have made the difference because there was 2 or 3 bombs wide open up the field where you saw the safety go over to try cover receiver that the corner stayed with up the field, and he left that guy wide open on a couple drives that ended up scoring touchdowns. I think at least one of those, if he's in on, he stops, and that might be a whole different game.
Well, and to me, I've said this about them, the difference between now and where they were in their dynastic mid-2010s. He's their pro prospect, other than their offensive lineman. Obviously, they churn out offensive linemen in the NFL like nobody's business. But, you know, I think he's their best pro prospect defensively. So I think that makes a difference. In the past, when they were just the juggernaut, they had NFL people dotting the team everywhere. They just don't have, they're still a very good team and still pretty well coached, I think, even with a new coach. But you see that difference when they don't have just a lineup that's replete with, I mean, this is maybe where the portals hit them. I think some of their recruiting hurts them a little bit too, because they go, you know, obviously, I've said this about our recruiting in South Dakota, and we'll touch on it throughout the year. This state's going through a renaissance with its high school football. Like, it's producing more high-level division, not just for the FCS, but the FBS. And some of that helps, too, that we now have guys like Kalen DeBoer, Josh Heupel, and all these South Dakota connections at the FBS level, at very high levels. But it's like we produce more Division I players now than ever before. North Dakota doesn't have that within their state. They produce a few, and most of them go to NDSU, or some end up at UND, but they don't have this volume of talent. And the fact that South Dakota State can get them, and, you know, it does tug at the heartstrings a little bit when you're, we talked about Griffin's performance today. I've got news. I have a feeling FBS people are going to start making some offers. I don't know anything. That's just me connecting some dots after a game like this, and if he has a big season. But I think some of the reason that maybe the portal will never quite hit SDSU as hard as it did NDSU is because they have so many of these in-state kids, and that pulls it in a different way. NDSU, a lot of those guys who have transferred are Florida, deep south. They go way farther out. It's just a different, they don't have any reason to want to stay in, especially if they've won national championships. They don't have any reason to stay in Fargo, North Dakota. They're going to go play in the big, the linebacker they had, I can't remember his name, who went to LSU. Why would he stay another year? What? Their receiver, Eli Green, he had a pretty good game for Iowa State today. How much better would he have made them this year? It's one of those things where South Dakota State has so much, can kind of rely a little more on their home grounds, a little more so than North Dakota, who still goes to Minneapolis. They still get good players out of there, but they can kind of.
That's why it's so huge that SDSU is starting to lock down the state of South Dakota. They think of how many great players those NDSU title teams had from South Dakota. Yeah. They had a bunch of them.
Well, I'm curious too, because Tyler Roll leaving was huge. I think NDSU made the right call ultimately. It's a tough one because I knew Tyler when he was a player. I love the guy, but in the portal era, they wanted someone with a little more head coaching experience and somebody who's got those Division I connections. Polisek's now been at Wyoming and Iowa, but Tyler, from my understanding, was the main South Dakota recruiter down here. And you've already got the situation now where South Dakota State has gotten so much better. So now people are, I've talked a lot with Curtis Riggs. I did a story there that we aired in our Pigskin preview. It used to be that I remember when Taryn got recruited, when he committed here, I think the story, Zimmer's told that, Stick said, we never get a guy from NDSU. Well, now all the kids in South Dakota want to go to SDSU. It used to be if NDSU wanted a guy, they would go up there because that's kind of, that's where you're going to go to win a national title. Well, now that's not the case. Now your top recruiter is gone for South Dakota is gone to Iowa State. I don't know that I've not heard a lot of the guys they've signed recently. I know they got one guy out of Washington last year, but otherwise a lot of the guys they're getting are kind of legacies. They got Jet Zabel, but his brother Gray is obviously on the team. I'm not saying that's the only reason, but that helped. They had another guy who I think was a legacy as well. So they're struggling in that department. And this is a bad time to not have that connection because now you mentioned all those great players they had before. It's beer time. It's always beer time, man. Now it's even worse because now the talent is even better than it was when they had gotten those guys like a Preston Evans or I think Gebhardt was one of them too, if I'm not mistaken. There's more talent now they could tap into than there was a decade ago. And now they don't have their number one guy recruiting it. So I will see if that, obviously, even a guy like, even we talk about South Dakota State, even South Dakota getting a guy like Kane Wallner. That's a guy who NDSU was after. And that's going to be a huge get for USD. He would be great up at NDSU. He's going to be a factor for them. So even if they're not winning the head-to-head, that to me is a sign that they're not recruiting the state as closely as they should have. Because if you're not, I know Bison fans have kind of poo-pooed that, and then some of the other ones, but it's like you're starting to lose some battles.
They'd had him.
Maybe, perhaps, but I think I'm sure. Oh yeah, that's their thing. But that's a guy that in the past I think they would have maybe focused a little harder on, and I think clearly I don't think their focus is right now very highly on South Dakota, and it's not a good time to be brushing the state aside because it's going through its best renaissance, it's not going to stop. And one of the other things that was interesting too was even if these guys don't pan out at an FBS school, you still have that connection with them where if they don't work out there, maybe they transfer. I mean, I think Lincoln Keenholz, I don't know if he's going to see the field at Oklahoma State or Ohio State, but NDSU he was really close to going to NDSU from my understanding. Maybe he transfers to NDSU if things don't work out. I'm not saying that still isn't an option eventually, but now all that staff is kind of gone. I mean, I'm not saying I don't know what would happen there, but at least you keep those connections with those guys that you recruited. And I think SDSU, I know Stig would do that a lot. At least you keep those connections where, okay, if this doesn't work out, we've known you forever. We've always been in your corner. And if, things don't work out for you at this big time school, you can come back home and we'll find a place and we'll develop you. I wouldn't be shocked if that ends up happening down the road here with some kids who've gone out of state here eventually. I mean, but even some of the guys who are now on Alabama's radars still think pretty highly of SDSU right now. So it's a good sign. We should probably wrap up here because
I think we need to wrap up. I
was going to say the only other things looking ahead to next week. Didn't touch on the Coyotes much, but that was a pretty open and shut game. Northern State just does not have a whole lot of. I think we saw that they had like 50 new players on their roster, so that was I will say it makes you feel. I know Zimmer mentioned this. Makes you feel a little older to see. This was before I got out here, although I think I covered him in Fargo. He was probably playing. Probably makes you feel older to see Stefan Logan's kid returning a touchdown for the Coyotes on a kickoff.
That's wild.
I would say maybe, I'll say this. I think their special teams could be decent for them this year. He looks good. Still a little worried about their pass game. I'll be curious to see what they do against Wisconsin next week. I think that's a game that I don't expect them to win, but Wisconsin struggled a lot today with Western Michigan. That I would hope they could compete and give them a run. I hope they kind of give them the game that Western Michigan gave at least. That would be a good sign. But there's still some struggles, I think, in the passing game because Aiden Bauman didn't do much, and it just takes him so long at times to release the ball. They've got to speed up a little bit there. But, like I said, not – as I'll say when SDSU plays Augustana, probably not a whole lot you can take from the Division II game to really apply forward. But, yeah, next week's schedule, obviously, we'll have Incarnate Word. We'll have to see when the show gets on because you might be pretty late.
Yeah, I'll be late. That's a fact.
Well, I mean, maybe if they blow them out, you can get out,
right.
That was part of the problem last year was that game came down to the last minute, literally last second, and then they had to replay it anyway.
Right.
So, that would be the nice thing. If some of these games are out of hand, you can probably get out and beat the traffic.
Right.
But, yeah, do I think the Jacks
for once? I probably will if they get out of hand because we'll have the new one with us. So we'll have Xena Warrior Princess with us.
That's a good note to end on. And like I said, next week games of interest. I think locally, like I said, I'll have some eyes on that USD Wisconsin game. I think we'll not entirely fair, as I said. Same with SDSU. You can't judge FBS isn't a great judge, but I think if they compete well in that game, it's a good sign for them moving forward. North Dakota State should run through Eddie George's Tennessee State team in the Fargo Dome. Somebody mentioned this Montana and UND is somewhat interesting next week because UND gave Iowa State a fight this week. Defensively, they were all right. They had a 22-play drive. Offensively, they're a work in progress, to put it mildly. Missouri State will take an FBS shot next week. They are at Ball State, which maybe that's a game they could win. Ball State's typically not very good. Youngstown's got Valpo. Northern Iowa had St. Thomas. Southern Illinois, I didn't see what they did this week. Did they even play?
They played BYU. They got beat by 31.
Okay, yeah, I remember that. Some of these games I just didn't even see. They're at Austin P. I don't know.
Yeah, P.
I always chuckle when I say P.
They always have signs that say "Let's go P."
That's a pretty good note to end on. Finally, Illinois State at Northern Alabama, Indiana State at Eastern Illinois, and Butler at Murray State. And shout out to Murray State. They got former Washington high school quarterback Jaden Johansson. So that's the slate next week. Not an FBS game, but I think it'll still be a pretty fun obviously one FBS game, a couple FBS games locally, but I think it's still a pretty interesting slate, and it's gonna be a fun season. So thanks for all you guys who've joined on the ride. Brendan, thanks for Jackrabbit Illustrated. Thanks for bringing my rambling butt on this thing and adding a countdown clock, because I'm probably going to need that for the rants.
I think it's pretty
And
great.
in 2 weeks, when CSU beats Colorado, I am going to be a happy man, because I don't know how the hell we're going to do it, but we're going to find a way. Damn it.
By God, it's going to happen.
It's in Fort Collins. We can't. Maybe the last time we're ever going to play them. We can't lose this game. I don't care if we don't win another game. I just want the one. Christ. Just don't lose 52-0 again, please. Anyway, y'all have a good night.
Night.